I'll do roll call first, and when I say your name, please reply with here. So Cook? Here. Fowler?
Here.
Lambers?
Here.
Nieves?
Here.
Berlinski?
Here.
Shea is absent at the moment, and then Jay Peters. And I too am here. So we have a quorum. So we'll start with the first order on the agenda, which is the approval of the meeting minutes from August 4th. Trusting that you've all had an opportunity to read those over. And we also need to approve the meeting minutes from the special meeting that was August 13th. Both of those were included in the packet. If there are no comments, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. I'll second that.
And Phil, can that hold for both then?
You can just, I don't think you need a roll call vote for it.
I don't think so either. Okay. So a motion to approve passes. First order on, first order here is for public comment. So if, and this is for items that are not currently on the agenda. So if you are on the agenda tonight, this isn't the time for that. We'll get to it when we're discussing your property. But if there's anyone here from the public who has comments they would like to make, if they would just limit comments to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. I think everybody's here, though, is for a specific property, though, so. Okay, we'll move right on to the next one. The next item on the agenda is unfinished business, and that's the COA for 181 West 11th Street. Phil, do you want to tee that one up for us?
Sure. Maybe while Mallory's getting the images up, I'll just tell you, you recall back in, I think it was June, perhaps, you approved a certificate of appropriateness for much of the addition that was being proposed at the time. And now Dirk Walcott and Bill and Maggie Sewell are back trying to address the conditions of approval that were part of the motion back when you approved it. And really the focus is of your review today is on the windows on the north elevation and both the east and west elevation. They've met the requirement. One of the conditions was that siding would be comparable to what's on the upper part of the home, and that is what they're illustrating on the rendering. But the windows was the big question mark, and I don't know, Dirk, if you want to sort of jump in and kind of lead the charge on this? Or?
Sure. Thank you and good evening. So when we first met, we had, I don't know, can you hear me okay? We had more of a ribbon of upper windows, and it was very symmetrical. And you guys asked us to revisit that and maybe come up with something that was more consistent with the language of the house. We talked about the need that the owners desire for consistency with the upper windows. They don't like the multiple window panes. They like the simplicity of the upper windows. So I try to stay with that. There are some kind of clear story windows that are above the bed in the master bedroom, and then the bathroom, which is at the kind of the east side of the house, was kind of a challenge because to try to get light in there, we have the one window on the east wall which would have some kind of frosting or opaqueness to it for privacy. And we looked at a variety of options. We actually presented, Phil and I met, and I presented something that had like a low window at the countertop, and it just didn't seem to work. And so we came back and they decided not to have any fenestration on the north side in the bathroom area because with what they're trying to do on the inside, it was just something had to get compromised. So this is what we've ended up with. So the main large windows are comparable with the rest of the upper story windows, same size, same proportion. They have the one clear story over the master bedroom area. And then, Phil, you didn't mention it, but we did address the brackets.
Yep.
That you can see on the northwest rendering there at the corners of the upper level. So that's where we've been, and if you have any questions, feel free to answer them for you.
Any questions for Dirk?
I like the way you rethought the windows. It seems like they are much more congruent with the rest of the upper story of the house, and probably, I mean, I know you were working with a fairly tricky area up there and trying to figure out how to do that, especially with the bathroom and privacy and full windows. So it looks like you've come up with a solution that you're feeling good about for this space. Yeah. So the only thing we're really looking at here, Phil, is just the window differences from what they had before. I mean, that looks like, as I'm looking through that.
They, I think, are matching, essentially matching all the windows on that second floor addition.
Yep.
With the glasses on the east side, the glass is different, but similar size opening.
And then I think the siding has changed too, because wasn't there a vertical siding on the back of the house? Am I remembering that?
Right, and
Yeah.
your recommendation and suggestions, which we took, were to, because there is multiple types of siding on the house, there was a 4-inch siding and then a larger 6 to 8 inch siding, that we go with one or the other. And we had talked about in the last meeting that the larger siding, the lap siding, seemed to be a good match for the second floor, and not to, make it more convoluted by introducing something new to the design. So that we went with basically your recommendation there.
Yeah, I think it looks really good.
Yeah, I do too. Do any of the commissioners have any questions specifically about the project? If not, it sounds like somebody might be ready to make a motion.
I will move to amend the approved June 2, 2020 certificate of appropriateness as requested and per testimony for windows on the addition at 151 West 11th Street based on local guidelines and Secretary of State's Interior Standard Number 9, that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property, and that new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment.
Support.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add or any questions before we vote? This is kind of fun. It's the first time we haven't had to vote with a name roll call in a while. So I'll just say, all those in support say yes.
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 Yes. All those who deny say no. I also support. Motion carries. Thank you. right, next on the agenda, we move into new business. And the first order is a certificate of appropriateness amendment for 240 West 9th Street for Jordy and Karen Fuentes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. We were just looking for two changes from last time we gathered. The first one is simply the upgrading of the windows. Is better quality window, although it has the cladding on it, which would benefit for us in terms of quality and also upkeep. And then the second request is a modification in the front porch. We're looking for a main entrance and that we feel will be more welcoming. And it goes, we documented a little bit with the Queen Anne style and the language of the neighborhood. I think will be okay. For us, personally, we could benefit from the functionality of the porch. Since we enter in only through the side, doesn't give us that much room for use that space for us because it will be just a transitional due to the narrow 5 feet opening. So those were just the two requests. Right.
Okay, thank you. So if I understand correctly, do we want to take the, does anyone have a preference with taking the revision to the windows, aside from the porch steps at the beginning? We'll tackle the windows first? Anybody? Okay. I just know sometimes it's easier if we break it down rather than try to roll it all up into one.
Mhm.
So if I understand correctly, so the change in the window is moving from an all-wood window to a wood interior with an exterior aluminum clad? Is
Yes.
that what
Yes.
you're
Uh,
requesting?
Yeah, from the last meeting, basically it's two windows in the face and the top of the house, and one window that is transformed to double door. That was approved in the last meeting we had. Simply it's just a specification of the type of window. We have several options, and it seems that we could upgrade to a better quality. That's the only difference respect what was approved. Our historic windows is Colby. I know we had other options that were presented like Anderson, but we went to the better quality that we could obtain for that.
Kim, if I may just pose a question here.
Mhm.
The existing windows on the house,
Yes.
the remainder of the house, are those, what are they today? Are they wood-clad wood
Yes.
windows, or are they
I think they're wood windows.
wood
Yes.
windows? Okay.
If I
Yeah.
remember right, they were wood interior and exterior, if I
Correct.
remember correctly.
Yes, correct.
Is that?
Maybe some of the members that have been here longer would address this, because I remember asking when I redid my house, if I could have clad windows, and I think the answer was generally no. Could someone speak to it better than I can, that the wood inside and wood outside have been the preferred?
Yes, that's true. So if we are replacing a window because of
Mhm.
deterioration, I mean, obviously, our first
Mhm.
choice would be to have the window be able to be repaired in
Mhm.
some way.
Mhm.
If the windows are at such a point where they've
Mhm.
deteriorated to the point where they have to be replaced, not unlike what we do with porch floors or other
Mhm.
things, it's really a like for like.
Mhm.
So if there's a window that's wood exterior and wood interior, and then our preference is to
Mhm.
replace with a comparable window,
Mhm.
obviously same dimensionally, but
Mhm.
also wood exterior and wood
Mhm.
interior.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
Not just for consistency with what was there before, but also
Correct.
with consistency for what
Yes.
maintains in the rest of the home,
Mhm.
which is, I believe, why it was initially approved
Mhm.
with the wood for wood, because
Correct.
that is our preference.
Correct.
For continuity.
Yes. Okay. The only thing I would say is, of the three, we have two windows and one door. One window is octagonal right now, so we are replacing it for more historically correct or appealing rectangular one. And one window totally disappears, it becomes a door. So I don't know if that would be justification enough to make it, because it's a new perspective from the house, that I would agree with whatever you decide.
Sure. I think that even though it's, even though you're repurposing that space for a
yes.
door where it was a
Okay.
window before,
Yes.
the rest of the windows on the home are wood interior and
Mhm.
exterior, so
Mhm.
you still
Okay.
have,
All right.
even though that particular one is
Sure.
changing, you still have the same kind of conflict
Mhm.
of materials between what was there and what will be placed there.
All right.
But obviously, I am not the only voice here, so I am only one. I'm only one
That's all
voice
right.
amongst the commission. But typically, in a replacement situation, we do, which is why we had approved the wood
Okay.
interior and wood exterior
All right.
in the
all right.
existing. So, again, if anybody has any questions they would like to ask? Or a different position on that? I mean, I know we're just talking about windows, and then we'll talk about the front porch.
Kim, if I could maybe add a little context to this, back when
Yeah.
you approved it in June, approved the project in
Mhm.
general in June, you gave them some options on siding. If you remember a discussion they had,
Mhm.
three different options that they were
Mhm.
looking at. One was to restore and patch the existing siding, the existing wood siding, replace vinyl for the vinyl siding that was covering that wood siding,
Mhm.
or to utilize hardy board or similar fiber cement. I believe they've decided to patch the existing and are able to work with the existing siding.
No, actually, what we did is remove the siding, was vinyl, and our first incline for sure is to restore the wood. We want to bring the house back to that. Although we are trying to find contractors, it seems that they're, pushing towards the cement board is their
Yeah.
priority. So we're still working on that, but
Okay.
we want to get the wood cladding outside, yes.
That's probably another reason, quite honestly, if you are going through all the effort to restore that
Mhm.
beautiful home to
Sure.
the wood
Sure.
siding, that's another reason why, in my own personal vote, and I do not speak for the
Mhm.
commission,
Mhm.
why the preference would be to have the wood with wood, because I don't
Sure.
think you'll ever be able to recreate in
Okay.
aluminum what you have in wood, especially in the continuity with the rest of the windows. But again, that is only
Sure.
one voice. So unless anybody has another comment, maybe I'll move on to the front porch here. You guys are really like a lively audience tonight.
Well, I have a question before we move on.
Yes.
Was there, is there a reason that you guys wanted to go and change the windows? Are you concerned about putting in wood
Well-
replacement?
First is, it looks closer to the historic references we have there. I think that appeals to us more. Second, one of the windows will produce more lighting in the interior. It's an area, a living space area that we feel is more livable and more interesting to us. And also the utilization of that front porch on the top, that we have access to that. So it's functional, and also how it speaks more to historic language of the house through the years.
So just to make sure I understand, because I don't
Mhm.
want to I don't want to close the books on this without understanding. So
Mhm.
the windows that you're proposing that are aluminum clad on the exterior versus wood clad, you're saying are more in keeping with, they offer something different? Or is it a
Yes.
dimensional thing that you're
One of-
unable to meet with the wood?
Yeah, we're talking about one new window,
Mhm.
I think in the west side, then one window in the front that becomes the door, right? And the two smaller windows on the top. One of them was octagonal, was obviously an add,
Yeah.
so. Yeah, but again, it's not a big incline of mine to have cladding or not, no. So you defer to the wood, that'll be fine.
I mean, I think we're just wondering,
Mm.
can the windows look just like what you want, only be in wood on the outside instead of the clad
Right.
window?
I have to analyze that a little deeper with Colby, the company, but I know historically they have very good reputation in terms of looking for historic reproduction. So my guess is we'll be very close to what it is now in terms of looks. But again, I cannot go through the details because I have not
Yeah,
gone deep enough.
no, it seems if the company is going to all that trouble to have historically accurate windows, they would know
Yes.
that in most places,
Yes,
aluminum cladding on the outside would kind of
Yeah.
destroy the
Yeah.
historic
Mhm.
reference or,
Mhm. Mhm.
use, but, I mean,
Yeah, that's what we choose.
that's only me speaking, you know?
I would think that you would be able to, I would think that you'd be able to find a company to work with where you'd be able to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish with
Mhm.
the same wood exterior as you
Mhm.
would in an aluminum
Sure.
clad.
Mhm.
I think that's where you were going to.
Yeah,
that
yeah, I
seems
mean,
like
I
we'd be
think
able-
we're all in favor of what you want to do with the windows.
Oh,
just,
yeah,
it seems like all the other houses, or windows in the house are wood, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
to have it match those seems to
Sure,
us more,
sure.
suitable than suddenly having
Mhm.
just a few windows that have the aluminum
Mhm.
clad.
mhm. That's fine. All right.
so I think you have an idea of which way the board is probably swaying on that, one with the windows, but let's
Yep.
talk a little bit more about the porch detail,
Yes.
and the front steps. So
Mm.
so why don't, share a little bit
Mhm.
more about how exactly you'd like to see that changed.
Well, the front of the house is a little bit of a typical where the entrance is just through one side. We thought to became a more welcoming place and more functional place for us if those steps, I mean, we are not eliminating the ones that are there, just we're adding just that front entrance for access to the house and use of that space in a better way. I mean, will give us a second option to enter the house that has not to be through the side. So we won't, have a sitting place or whatever, it'll be also interesting for us.
Yeah, I actually like having a stairway there. I mean, I walk by that house a lot, and I see all the siding off it, which is, have the challenges there, but it's looking cool. But I like the welcoming nature of having stairs go right up from the public sidewalk rather than looking kind of like a barricade the way it does now with no breaks in the porch railing and
Right.
sealed off from the sidewalk. I mean,
I would say usually we are not in favor of adding in, a centralized step like this if it's
Mhm.
not already there.
Mhm.
But I really do think that this adds a lot to the front of the home.
Mhm. Another added component now that we have removed the siding, could be an indication of a possible wraparound porch that was there in existence. The window we see here in the side, after taking the siding, it looks totally open with different lines, so it seems, or indicates the possibility of a door there. So that's another, to know how long that side.
so this might not even be the original porch configuration anyway.
Correct.
We've certainly seen porches come and go and change in the historic district.
Could I ask What is presently below the level of the porch floor in the front? Is that lattice work of some sort, or is that stone? Way down at the bottom.
Yes. Can you help me there,
So-
Karen?
It's like cinder block,
Yes,
A
cinder
block,
block.
Is
okay.
it?
which I thought we were gonna be able to cover, and then we had shown the stone that matches the garage sort of. We were trying to replace it, or not replace it, but it was covered, right?
I don't know.
Do you want to,
What do you-
There's no lattice, it's either cinder block
Yes.
with the beams or the.
Support
yeah,
for-
support,
For the deck.
the nicer block, that matches the garage.
okay.
And I think there's a cut sheet of that in here, John. I thought I'd seen it, maybe not.
I see the sort of vertical, I don't want to say lattice work, but where the steps are, but it's not clear what's.
What do you mean?
Underneath the stairs themselves, not, yeah.
On the side, on the side of
where
the
the s-
addition?
Yeah, where the stairs come down and along
Yes,
the side.
yes, that was the proposed design. I think it's just wood. Yes.
So you think this is stone?
I think so,
Yeah, the front below is all stone. It's either stone and, or some of it's cement block looking at it. I don't know, it's even
Yes.
Yeah,
different
that's
materials,
their
but.
sort of-
Sure, thank you.
Sorry about that, yeah.
I think the stairs look fabulous.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm like,
I think
it's
I
it's,
want your
very
stairs.
attractive.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think this is one house where that really adds a lot to the front porch.
Yeah.
and I hadn't thought of it before, but it sort of looks like these are the stairs for the public and these are the stairs for family. It's a
right.
little like the two-door house.
Are you gonna ask for a
Yeah,
second
exactly.
door in the front?
yeah.
I probably would,
I
probably would go
know
up the
somebody that
middle.
would sell you a door,
Yeah, true.
historic door.
That's right.
Yeah.
Kim, do you feel that this needs to be separate motions, or are you?
I think well, Phil, what's your preference?
I think you could do it either way. You could do separate motions, or you could make one motion, even if you're in favor of one part of it and not another. You can sort that out in a single motion.
Do we have collectively, as a group, everything we need in terms of materiality and scale for the porch, or for the stairs?
I wasn't a part of the June discussion, but was the porch renovation part of it? Has that kind of all, was that part of the original approval process? What the railing, what the flooring was gonna be for that porch?
I think was included.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was like,
Yes.
and I guess our intention would be to have the front stairs match the.
What you're doing
The one
there?
that was on the side?
Yeah, they would match.
Because I felt like we had that really pretty buttoned up when we went through that before and now with the addition of the front, it seems like as like two would be enough of a solution, because I felt like what you were planning was right in line with
Mhm.
what we would be comfortable with.
Mhm.
So, since I cannot make a motion, I will leave it up to any commissioner who would like to, whether they feel compelled to make it as one motion or two.
Well, I see a possible motion here.
I knew you would, John.
I'd like to move to approve the application for a certificate of appropriateness as submitted and per testimony for the new front steps and alternative replacement doors and windows, with the request that those windows be wood on the inside and out, as proposed and based on local guidelines in the Secretary of Interior Standard 9. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment.
I'll second that.
A double
Thanks,
second.
everybody.
Can I just ask,
Mhm.
John asked, I think the wording was request, do we need to say, you know, like I don't know, require? I mean, maybe it's just parsing the words, but
I think we can approve that the windows are wood inside and out.
Yeah.
That would
That's
probably
fine.
be the
Yeah, okay.
language.
I think the word require sounded harsh to my
I
brain
know.
as
I
it
know,
was
it
coming out,
sounds rough.
but,
if you
but
feel
I
like
think it's
it,
the way we want to do it.
yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
thank you, Mark, that's helpful.
So the clarification is that the windows are approved to be wood inside and out. Is that enough of a clarification, Phil?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, so all those in favor, say yes?
Yes.
All right.
All those opposed, say no? I also say yes, motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will note that Nick has excused himself from the vote, so it's a 6-0 vote.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Housekeeping.
Thank you. Would you like to come to my house next? Thank you, Phil. We're cooking right along here. Okay, next on the, under new business, we have got the COA revised for Barb Masuga at 60 West 15th. Hi, Barb, how are you?
Hi,
Good
everyone.
to see you, or see you from the nose up.
Yeah.
Nice to almost see you.
That's right.
Yes.
Barb,
I'm with
can I
you.
tee this up for you a little bit here?
Yeah,
Just to,
please do that.
you
That would-
saw earlier in the week, if you reviewed the packet earlier in the week, you saw that this was an application for a porch roof on the rear side, the north side of, or south side of the home. Ran into some difficulties with foundations and that sort of thing with our building inspection office. So withdrew that application and turned around with the same, with a new application that seemed simple enough that we kept them on the agenda or kept Barb on the agenda, and so that's what's before you tonight. And I can describe it very easily. It's an aluminum roofs or awnings over all of the pedestrian entrances into the house, the front door, and then the two doors on the south side of the building. And she's got two options for those. One is a flat roof, and one is a curved roof. They're the two options. And the color would be the gray on the charcoal gray on the left. I think it's charcoal gray. Sorry. Anything else?
Nope. Yeah, I had to change plans, and I thank you so much for, I sent it in at 2:45 a.m. And I'm like, I know I can't really cheat like this, but can I? So anyway, I really appreciate that. I've been dreaming about this on and off, and really would like to add that aesthetic to my home. And then also as in the south, in the rear, that will help the southern exposure. I originally wanted porches on them, but because of my setbacks, I was challenged. So then I kept thinking about it and came up with these awnings. And I am leaning towards the concave. I think that the other looks a little more contemporary. I was concerned about where it would hit because my rear doors both open up towards outside. So I was a little concerned about the clearance, but after doing some measuring and a lot of different research, I feel like it will comply with the concave. That's the one I want to go with. I think it matches the home a little better. And I think there were some questions about the keystones. That was one of my key things. I didn't want to hide those because I put those intentionally to add to the aesthetic of the home. But after doing measuring and all of that, I realized that my house is set up so high, it's really not going to take away from it. There might be some levels where you may not see them quite as prominent, but I don't see where that's going to be an issue. Another question, staff question, was about my lighting. I plan to extend it over to cover over my lighting also, because I feel like that's going to save on my lighting fixtures from the weather. And then also I have wood doors on the front, so I like that added extension to save on the wear and tear. I'm currently on my second set of doors right now, because the first set, it was almost a year to replace them, were not made properly. They were wicking water, so I hope to help keep more of the elements off my front wood doors also. Any questions? I don't know if I've covered anything. And then I also added, because you guys approved my COA for my pergola, so I added a picture of that too.
Thank you.
I
Struggle when I go
think I
by,
was
yeah.
supposed to do that, but I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to say, hey, look, and I'm doing pretty stuff.
Yeah, it looks great.
We're
It
still
does.
waiting for that invite. by the way.
Yeah, I forgot. I'm supposed to
Yeah,
have a party.
we didn't.
But because of COVID, I haven't done it, so.
Outdoor meeting.
That's
Yeah,
right, outdoor
Right,
meeting.
next one. Is that
But-
a cute little cat in the window too, or in the door?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That's my
Sold.
dog.
Oh, no, it's a
I'm
little
a cat
fluffy
lady, I
dog.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was to try to make you guys accept it, so.
Oh, Barb.
It's all
You know how to
ploy.
get us.
That's right.
So, any questions or anything else that needs to
Can
be
I ask,
covered?
what are the scrolls? It mentions Smith scroll or something. kind
Yeah,
of- Oh, there we are. I'm sorry. I'm
It's
sorry.
the
there-
side profile of
Sure.
the,
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's just a simple one. It doesn't have the little coils and stuff, just to keep the simplicity of the
So
home. It's very,
Is it a solid triangular sort of piece, or am I just looking at a curve, like flat?
it is more triangular. You can get them where there is kind of more of a V and it will tab to the side of your home, but I wanted more of the triangular structure.
They're not solid. Okay, great, thank you.
and I see, I was looking for dimensions. So 8 foot wide on the front and rear patio and 6 foot wide on the rear service door.
There is a slight change. I believe I can put a 5 foot over the rear service door to make it, what will happen, there'll be about 3 inches on each side of the lighting, on how it extends. So I don't need the complete 6 over the service door, because it's a 36-inch wide door, and then I want to cover the light over on the side. So I don't have to go all the way to the end of the house. I realize that I can kind of just center it, and it just has a nice balance over that door.
So it'll cover the light.
On the service door.
So I'm assuming it's centered on the door and it'll cover the light to the right of the service door, but it won't extend all the way to the
Not
end
all
of
the way,
building?
it'll kind of go midway, so it'll just kind of be a balance of
Okay.
that. It won't be exact balance, it'll be just a little offset, but as I viewed it, it's like, yes, that'll look off-centered balanced.
Got it.
If I find that I need a few more inches, they are custom-sized. I just gave that approximate.
Well, that makes sense, because even if you look at the way your concrete pad was poured in terms of the band that's sort of around it, and then where the more
Right.
pebbled is.
Yep. So I'll make sure I have that balance, because that stuff bothers me. Yeah.
I think there was a staff question as well about the installation of them. Do you
Yes.
know, is there flexibility on where that can be installed so you can hit the mortar instead of the brick, or?
I have contacted the company. I've had a couple phone calls out to them and an email to them, but I realize they're in Louisiana. So I do think maybe some of the delay is because of the hurricane that hit down there. But I'm very sensitive to the installation. They do have some installation that you can put it on the fascia board, but my fascia there is only 4 inches, so that's one thing I didn't know. But in their materials, they didn't show exactly the installation, but they say, we work with you and we make sure you have the right installation, whatever bolts or whatever you're putting it into. So whether I have to mount it, you know, maybe remove a little bit of that fascia, you know, to install it there. Or, you know, I'm not quite sure, and that's some questions that I have to ask them. But they do supply all the hardware to install it. And I probably won't try doing it myself, just to, so you're okay with it. I usually try to, but this one I think I'll leave to some professionals.
So is the idea that we would rather have it installed in the mortar than the brick, or don't we care? Or I'm wondering what the question,
I think it was that we would rather have it installed in the mortar rather than the brick, just due to integrity of the brick.
and so
If
since they're
isn't that-
custom,
yeah.
they may be able to adjust the installation to match where you want it, is that kind
Yeah,
of?
I'm not sure how that installs, if
Yeah.
there's certain holes that it goes in, but on
Yeah.
their one page, they showed all these heavy-duty anchors and things like that. So that
Yeah.
I'm uncertain of, but I think, you know, the brackets definitely maybe can't go right into the mortar just because of where they're placed on the width. How it's installed at the top, I'm not sure. I know if you have a fascia, they had these little tabs at the top, but I had a lot more questions for them. So that I'm uncertain of.
Will you have a local contractor doing the installation? We have a local contractor doing the installation?
Yes, I will.
Okay. We could get in touch with that contractor when they're ready to install it and meet out at the site and just work through that installation. What I'm worried about is there isn't a lot of room above each of those doors for installing it. I think if you put it on the fascia board, I think that interrupts a continuous line that runs around the house that's, I think, fairly significant. So it's a question of just working with the installer to make sure it's landing in the right place.
Yeah, I'll have to see, because I know on the front, the top of the keystone is bigger because I had a surround made around it. So it's more pronounced. I only have 6.5 inches from the top of the overhang to the top of that. So I will have to, you know, either remove that fascia and see what's there, you know, and how high up that brick went. So those will things I'll have to find out, but I can always come back from the company to see, you know, what the installation of because I'm curious myself as how that's mounted across the top, because they didn't show that,
Yeah.
so.
And you've got some fairly constrictive dimensions there, especially with doors that open outwards.
Well, on the front, the nice thing about the front, those open inside.
Right, the ones on the back, though, that open.
The ones on the back, although I have like, what do I have, to the top of the keystone, I think I have, let's see, where's my notes? I have 9 inches to the top of the keystone on the back. Because it's embedded in the stone. The other one had an extra surround that went around it. So it's a different construction there. So the one thing is, if I am compromised on the front and it won't work out how I want, I would still do the back once I find out about the installation.
That's what I was gonna ask too, kind of along those lines, is it seemed much more plausible on the back where you got that extra room, and
Yeah,
even if it overlaps the keystone, you know, so be it, that keystone's still back there and maybe it's visible to your sightlines, but that front opening is just so successful the way you designed it for
Right.
now, and with those lights and everything, it's, it may
Yeah.
not work out as well on that front.
I have concerns about that. That's why I wanted to find about the installation and ask
Yeah.
about that, because I am constricted and because it does protrude. And my concern is like, oh, do I have to maybe build that fascia out so it clears that depth? I don't know. So if it doesn't work on the front, I wouldn't try to impose it,
Shoehorn
you know.
it in. Yeah.
So I just don't, they didn't give me enough detail. They have a drawing, but it doesn't tell me enough, so. But definitely on the back, because of the southern exposure, I would like it on the front because of my wood door. The mailbox, the lighting, all those things. My overhangs there, they go out 16 inches. But having that, because it's supposed to go out 36 inches, I thought will help a little bit with weather.
And you're so tall too, that even that 16 inches doesn't mean as much as if it were, you know, a ranch house or something.
Exactly, because and the height of the front of the home is even higher than the back on how it ended up being. So I do think you'll see the visual from even the sidewalk walking past and seeing the Keystone, because like I said, I intentionally put those on there for that aesthetic appeal. So.
I like Nick's wording. I think, did you say her front entrance is so successful or so?
Yeah, it's so
It-
nice.
It's really a nice,
Yeah.
yeah. The more I look at it, the more I like it, and the more I think you probably don't want to break the line of the fascia piece.
When you say break the line, can you explain that completely?
That if you were to install it either higher up, so that the line of the fascia comes across and then visually at least stops and starts again over here. I
Yeah.
think that changes the success of the front.
I think so, too.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but,
Okay.
you know, because the fascia will still be there, it's just
Mhm.
that I can't put it underneath that fascia. I don't think there'll be
Oh,
enough.
I see. Okay.
I don't think there'll be enough room, but that's where I'd have to be. That one, and then if I do the back, the front, on the fascia, the back, I would continue doing that on the fascia too. And whether it's removed, you know, for that because of it protruding out, that's what I need to find out how the install works. Because they don't really say, you know, oh, there's holes in here and then you apply these screws in here. It's nothing like that. You know, I install a bunch of stuff, so I usually look for that kind of thing, but that's to be determined yet. And I can come back and once I get more information, but I have a feeling the hurricane has impacted their business right now.
How far recessed are those nice front doors within that opening?
How far out?
How far in do they recess?
I tried to get them in as much as I could
Yeah.
because that was supposed to not make it look quite as flat. They are the thickness, they go back with the brick, which was that about 3 inches maybe, the brick? But that's why I did put the surround on it to make it seem like it was recessed more. And I think maybe that was 1.5 inches, 2 inches, maybe, I can't remember, I don't recall. I did initially want it set back into the house, but had constrictions there.
The floor plan doesn't really work with bringing those back even more.
No, it didn't. No, that's just kind of the whole center section of the house that my concrete guy asked me, can you explain what this hallway is? I'm like, well, it's the main living quarters. But, yeah, so it all works.
Mhm.
But, you know, if I need to come back to give some installations, once I find that, I can do that. The one thing is, why I did want to get it in, because waiting till October meeting, and then it's 4 to 5 week lead time for custom sizes, and then I'm out to maybe November for installation, and then probably maybe even next year. I was hoping for my birthday in October. Happy birthday to me. But, you know, with this hurricane thing, I think somebody threw me another challenge, so. But I don't know, you know, hearing you say installing it, you know, because to me, installing it right underneath the overhang, that would cut into the fascia. So I'm not sure I understand the need to have it underneath that. So,
Yeah, I think there's a certain cleanness that the current facade has where there's this horizontal element that's really
Mhm.
consistent and it's everywhere in the house and it just runs nice and clean, and then
mhm.
there's a little breathing room between that element and your surround of your front door and your keystone and everything.
Right.
And I think it just doesn't really look like there's enough room to put all of this metal work in there without crowding that space.
Yeah, I'm thinking that if I can have the fascia, that's 6.5 inches because fascia is 4 inches. Otherwise, I only have 2.5 inches where I don't think the installation would work on the front then. So,
Did you have any sketches or conceptual diagrams or anything?
on my home, no, I just did, you know, like the one page that showed the styles. You know, and on their site, they have them, you know, most of them are up higher, although I have 8-foot doors too. So, you know, having them closer down. But that's where I thought to put it as high to the overhang as I can is where I was heading for. Because I do think, and actually the back could accommodate that because there's, you know, 4 inches, there's about 6 inches to the top of the keystone in the fascia, you know, because the, from the overhang to the keystone in the back is 9 inches. And so 4 of it is fascia. It definitely would work under that one. The front, I think is going to be a challenge, but I was game to have it at the top and just to save my wood doors a little bit more. Just because, and I thought it would add a little interest because, you know, ideally I had wanted a porch, but it was only a 13-foot setback, and you can't have a porch that didn't, you know, didn't work with code. But that I knew would be some challenge, even using the fascia. Can you approve it upon contingents? I don't know.
I feel that even if we don't see the sketch of it, you'll do well to look at a sketch and see if in fact it bothers your eye to break the line of that fascia board. Maybe
Well,
we're wrong, but-
I think if you had had a roof line there would have been a break. If I could have had a porch.
Right.
I you know, especially when I was doing the back, that would have been underneath, you know. It would have broke up because of where the porch would have been sticking out. So I think if you look at other historical places or anything that you see actually a porch on, you'd have the same situation. It's just that you have this one section that's coming out. So I should probably go look at Monica Donnelly's house again, because she's been my inspiration.
Sure.
And she did put a porch on hers because that's what had originally been there. And if you look at that, it doesn't have, you know, a fascia over the top of it. It is pretty, though. I like it. Any other questions, or?
And you said you have a 13-foot setback right now?
From the front of the house, yes, it's 13. And then I did call the city before I came here because I wanted to know if there's any permits for awnings, and they said as long as it's under 54 inches, and this would be 36. So your setback is more based on the post.
But you can go all the way down to a 10, so you could do a 3-foot deep kind of porch type of thing instead of an awning if you wanted to too. Did you explore that with them at all?
No, I didn't want, yeah.
You didn't want like a
No,
little-
I don't want to do that. I'd rather have the awning.
Okay.
That back, just the roof was gonna cost me an arm and a leg,
Okay.
you know, and these are going to be up there already. But I'm not sure because when I did explore the back, the pillars that were gonna be on it was restricting how much space I had to walk around on the top.
Right.
So then I wanted to put it on the step down. Well, then that didn't have the, what is it, the foundation?
Footings.
Underneath that, the footings. But then when I called my concrete guy, the back porch didn't have that either because it wasn't made to be weight bearing.
Right.
So I don't believe my front is probably built to be weight bearing either. So to build a porch, that's just not in the budget.
Okay.
And I think that would be more obtrusive than this awning. I just think it gives that little bit of an eyebrow, a little eyelash there that makes it a little happier. Just a little more dimension.
I love the awnings that you chose.
What was that?
I said, I really love the awnings that you chose.
Yeah, I think they're really pretty. And I do like it with the concave because I do think that fits the aesthetic a little bit more. I thought I would maybe have to do the straight just because of the doors going out, but then after I got up there with the yardstick and my sister's helping me, you know, I was testing it out.
Kim?
Yeah.
I'd like to move to approve the application for a certificate of appropriateness as submitted and per testimony for front and rear awnings at 60 West 15th Street as proposed, based on the local guidelines and the Secretary of Interior Standard 9. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment.
Second.
Does anyone have any additional questions or comments we want to make before we put it to a vote? Does anyone have any concerns about anchor points or anything else that we would want to revisit before Barb move forward as she tries to work through how to do this?
Well, Phil mentioned working with a contractor, is that?
So I can do that through you,
At
Phil,
least-
with staff on how the installation goes then?
Yeah, that'd be fine if they
Okay.
send you a detail.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the mass of the piece that actually adheres to the building.
Me too.
And its dimensions.
Yeah, so once I get more of that, I can
Sure.
send that,
Talk about it.
all that information to you, Phil.
Yeah,
And
and I can come over and take a look at it.
yeah, we can come up with the best that would be appropriate for
fine.
installation. Because that's one of my concerns too.
That's fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, especially as you know, you're trying to work through it and then whether or not that's going to work the way you want it to work.
Right,
on your home.
yeah, especially with that 4-inch fascia that I have, does that have to be removed? Does that, you know, so there's a lot of questions that I have.
So Phil, can we add a caveat then in there that says, I don't know if it's necessarily staff approval, but staff consultation on the way that it's mounted to the home?
Right.
Sure.
Okay, and I'll let you come up with the fancy language for that. So
Do we need to amend the motion for that, or not? Is that just something we can write into it, or?
I would suggest you say with a mounting determination in consultation with city staff.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to say.
That's what
Yeah,
you meant to
was that?
say.
That was
Right.
good.
I meant to say that. It was assumed.
With a mounting consultation from city staff.
Mhm.
There, it's official. All right, if anyone has, any other comments or questions? Okay, otherwise, all those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? I
Yes.
also say yes. There
Yes.
were no no's, I heard, so motion passes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your
you.
time.
Thanks,
Yep.
Barb.
It's a
All
very
right.
nice home. It really adds a lot.
Yeah, I love it, and I love the area, and it's,
It's hard to doubt your judgment because of all the great work that you've done.
yeah.
I know, because you can't really put a caveat in there that says, whatever Barb's eye tells her is the right thing.
Right,
But really, we
right.
trust you.
As much as
you're-
And
we'd
it's
like
your
to have
house
it
that
in.
you designed too,
Right,
so.
right, in Excel at first. But
Yes.
anyway, so, yeah, and the fence should be coming up as soon as they, Midtown moves a lamppost. So I'm all excited about it. So, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barb.
Okay, next on our agenda is administrative approval certificate of appropriateness for 318 Central Avenue. So I will let you tackle that one, Phil, or just share with us what that was.
Yeah, I did not bring the application. This is one of the couple houses. It's a mid-block house, and they're proposing a picket fence on two sides. And there's an existing fence behind them that is part of the house on 13th Street. It's part of the fencing for that house. So they will have, I think it's a 4-foot fence or just under 4 feet, like 38 inches, 39 inches, somewhere in there maybe.
Well, it
But
can't
it's a
be
picket.
solid then, right? That
No,
won't it be,
no,
okay,
It's picket, it's open,
okay.
so, yeah. So that's, it's a pretty straightforward application.
All right, moving right
You have a
along.
lot of pickets to sell, I think. Don't you? Don't
I
you have
do
some
have a
left
few.
over?
Yeah,
I do have a few.
maybe you can get the ones in between 334 and 318 to do them as well.
Good,
Fill them all in.
yeah.
Okay, next up is committee and staff report, so an update on the greenhouse.
Yeah, let me, there's a lot of kind of moving parts to this week's meeting with things switching in and out. And we had a meeting, we being Andy Kenyon, Mark Vanderplug, and I met with the city manager last week, talking about the greenhouse and both about what came out of the workshop back in February, as well as the comments from both the commissions at the joint meeting. The conclusions, this is a suggested direction for us to go on this. Based on what we heard, and we know there was no consensus on one particular approach, or there were lots of ideas about different elements of all of this. There are two statements in here on the first page. I handed this out to you, so you should have this at your place here. It's titled Greenhouse Process. Two statements right up front. One is that the Parks Department does not see any future use for any of or all of the existing facility in its current location. And along with that, they do see the potential for effective use of some portion of the facility at two locations, and that's Centennial Park, which is a preferred location from city staff, as well as potentially on Window on the Waterfront. The second point is that given the memorandum of understanding between the city and Evergreen Commons regarding Evergreen's acquisition of the greenhouse property, the city manager has had several conversations with Evergreen Commons, and there is no interest in the city greenhouse structures on their part. He is not willing at this point to go back for another conversation. He's had several, and they've been pretty clear in those conversations about their disinterest in the structures. So given that, and given the city has no need for the structure, then it moves us into where we started that workshop back in February, which is what are the alternative locations. As came out of that discussion and the joint meeting discussion, the two sites that seemed the most logical, that seemed to have the most support, were Centennial Park or in that vicinity, or the Window on the Waterfront. And the workshop surfaced three options for Window on the Waterfront. The challenge the city manager sees with going too deep into that discussion is that there are so many unknowns about what can happen in the future of Window on the Waterfront Park itself, in terms of the private properties all along that area, that that the preference really focuses in on Centennial Park at that point. But to do that, there's also a recognition that we need a master plan for Centennial Park. And I think that came loud and clear. It's been coming loud and clear even before the greenhouses came up, but it came up through loud and clear, I think, at the joint meeting. So this is the paragraph at the bottom of the first page. It really presents a question, and Andy Kenyon has his Parks and Recreation Commission meeting tonight, and they're having this a similar discussion as we are. The question is, are you supportive of the city undertaking a master plan for Centennial Park? What we've identified that would include, and we've got a whole lot more detail about very specific things, but in general it would include a statement of purpose and intentions for the park, identify guidelines for making improvements or changes in the park, identify a process and responsibilities for making recommendations to City Council for any such improvements or changes. And it's my recommendation that the site, when we talk about Centennial Park, we really talk about an area that is almost a block in every direction around Centennial Park, in part because those are all sort of intimate approaches to Centennial Park, and what happens in those areas is important to the park. Not that we control what goes on there, but that context is considered in the guidelines for the park. You'll see on the second page, one of the things that the master plan study should do, once it's identified the guidelines and the processes, is then do an evaluation of the appropriateness, pro or con, the pluses and minuses of some portion or all of the greenhouses to be located in the park. Does the greenhouse then fit the master plan for the park? So if there's a conclusion that it's yes, then we can move forward and begin more detailed work on the design, how much of the greenhouse might come and what the actual construction documents and things necessary to dismantle it and relocate it. But within that, there's also an approval process that this commission is particularly involved with. If it makes sense, if the evaluation says we've got a master plan for the park and there is an opportunity in the park for some piece of the greenhouse, then it sort of comes back on your table to say, are you willing to grant approval sufficient to allow that to be relocated to the park? That could mean continuing a listing of some portion of the greenhouse that gets moved. It could mean delisting. It could mean a notice to proceed. There's different approaches to how you might grant approval for that. Or you might come to the conclusion that there's a loss of significance because of the relocation and you're only taking some portion of it, that the historic significance is no longer there. It's there as an artifact, maybe in some forms, but not necessarily as a full architectural structure. But that then would be on your table to decide how you would want to move forward on that. If there is a decision to delist it or move in that direction, then there's another process that creates a committee that has to study it, and this is full of procedures to get to a point, but it's really key to follow the path to get to a decision where you're comfortable with a final decision. City manager is looking for a recommendation on pursuing this path. He's looking for it from both you and the Parks Commission. In the end, if we come up with no solutions, that either the master plan suggests that it's not appropriate for the greenhouse to be in the park, and we have no other place or no other ideas for it, perhaps by that point something has broken on the waterfront, and you could go back to the window on the waterfront and say maybe there's an opportunity here, but if that, as I might guess, if that's in the same status as it is today, still a lot of questions, then you're probably facing either selling the greenhouse for relocation somewhere else or approving the demolition of the greenhouse. And we talk a little bit in this also about what that master planning process would be. It's a relatively small park. I've looked at a number of master plans from other comparably sized squares in different communities. The substance of the plan is not difficult. We have a lot of history, and I passed out a copy of a report that was done in the 80s, late 80s, I think, about the history of Centennial Park. We've got additional information about the history. What we're suggesting is that we would bring a consultant in to work with us on the master plan. We'd be able to give them a lot of information for a running start, even to the point that maybe it's conducted in the way of a charrette process or a series of workshop meetings, relatively short duration kinds of time for this planning process, and that we can get a good recommendation and a good set of guidelines for the park moving forward. The objective is the Historic District Commission will have its issues and concerns about the things that can happen in the park. Those need to be spelled out in the plan. And the Parks Department certainly has their set of concerns and need to be able to do a lot of things, sort of on the spur of the moment, so that there needs to be enough guidance in the master plan that they're able to do those kinds of things. I'll stop talking. That's where we are in the conversations with the city manager.
So I have a couple questions.
Yep.
So, just timing-wise, they're related. Relatively quick in terms of pulling together the master planning process.
Mhm.
Like, just for timing's sake, what does relatively quick look like?
Yeah, good question. We need to report back to City Council is our next step. Assuming we have support from both commissions, we'll go back to council probably in September sometime. I know it's on the city manager's tickler list for items to get before council. So once we get their approval to move forward with this process, then it's getting a request for proposals together, identifying, and that doesn't have to be lengthy in terms of time, but getting together, identifying a landscape architecture firm, one that has historic park experience, that's familiar with this kind of work, and hopefully somebody that's familiar locally and aware of contemporary needs within the park as well as historic needs. So identifying that consultant, either that consultant brings all the manpower to do the work, or that consultant works with staff, from our office and from Andy's office, to put this together. In an overall time frame, I'd like to say this could be done, probably by the end of the year if we've got a consultant that can get to it quickly enough. We're eager to get it off our plate. We're eager to deal with the building because we don't want to go through, we'll be into winter at that point. But the longer it sits, the more concerned we get about the condition of it. So.
Yeah, so that was my second question about timing is, there are things that, like the plastic shouldn't be on the greenhouse now. I mean, between the humidity and everything else, it's problematic for what is there. So the longer it sits unmaintained in any way, the more at risk the structure becomes. And we've seen it fall into disrepair just because of lack of either funding or because the new grow house has been built. The new grow house is lovely, but it's been purposefully neglected. And that's not, I'm not saying someone's intentionally like letting it rot into the ground, but purposeful neglect is really kind of the state that it's in.
Yeah.
And I just wouldn't want to see it be neglected to the point where we are unable to sort of rescue it and repurpose if that's the desire.
Yeah, we're concerned, city manager's concerned about the same thing, and we're also concerned that we're holding other people, other property owners' feet to the fire on condition of property, and we should be doing the same to ourselves. So we're eager to move on this.
So what they're looking for from us has to do with your first comment here about supportive of the city undertaking a master plan for Centennial Park. Is that really what they're looking for us to?
Yeah, they want to see that you're supportive of that. I didn't spend much time talking about window on the waterfront, but there's also a suggestion in here that both commissions stay in touch with any conversation that's going on as far as window on the waterfront park happens. If something, if there's a proposal that comes in tomorrow, there ought to be a sense of, there ought to be an understanding of what that proposal is, and does it create any opportunities that might be better or different than what Centennial offers. But the thrust is moving forward with a focus on Centennial in terms of the master plan.
I know there are other commissions for the city that are also looking at window on the waterfront, like the PAC
Arts.
Commission, Public Arts Council. So I think a lot of people have some good ideas about what to do with those spaces, but I know those were all in the waterfront planning as well.
Yeah. I think there's even uncertainty about where buildings might be constructed down there, public
Mhm.
or private,
Mm-hmm.
on public or private property. So it's, there's all kinds of opportunity there right now. That's part of the challenge, is that it's pretty wide open. So if you have concerns about this, the other suggestion that Andy and I talked about it, if he's sensing some concerns on the part of his commission, or we are here, we can get a joint meeting together again and try to work through whatever those issues are. I think city manager would like to see the commissions stay in touch with this issue, both commissions staying in touch with this. So I would assume going through the master planning process would be an opportunity for a lot of input from both commissions.
And I can't speak for the commission, but it's been no secret that I am hugely in support of a master plan for Centennial Park. So I personally find a lot of value in that, and cannot urge us to move fast enough to support, but that's my own position.
I agree with Kim.
Was that fast enough?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
awesome.
No, I would support the concept of the city undertaking a master plan for Centennial Park.
It seems there have been so many
Absolutely.
things that we've kind of been handcuffed on
Mhm.
discussing, and it's been a chicken and egg for us for at least the entire time that I've been on the commission. I think others have experienced the same, so.
Mhm.
And I think more than once I've heard someone say, well, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. We don't really have a plan for Centennial Park. So I don't know if that fits in the park or not. I
That's what
like it.
Andy says it all the
but,
time, because
yeah.
he's looking for guidance around what he's doing too, and without that plan.
Mhm.
And this actually dovetails into, not to completely skip point B, but this does dovetail into discussion about the Udo and the Centennial that Nick had brought before us. So we can either put a pin in that and go to B and then go on to that, but I'm just saying there's a connection point there too that has to do with looking at the buildings around Centennial Park.
Yeah, I think a plan for the park would be a great next step for the city to take on, as long as it was really clear and on the record and really sincere that this idea of the greenhouse being in the plan is not a given, but rather something that would need to emerge in the planning process. And for the time being, this plan sounds great, and that's it's a factor in the conversation, but certainly not, the plan can't be some means to an end to get the greenhouse into the park. I mean, that could be the best solution,
Mhm.
and we have to be open to it, but we should be on the record and be super clear that when we say we support a plan, that's all we're saying. We're not saying anything necessarily about it, the greenhouse.
That's a good clarification point, because the support that I mentioned of plan for Centennial Park came before any of the discussion about the greenhouse. So that's a great point of clarification, that if it ends up that way, that's one thing, but the plan is needed regardless of whether we had a greenhouse to contend with or not.
The other, I guess, thing that I would just mention is that the park context, and I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit here in a minute, but the park context really goes beyond the boundaries of the park. It includes the urban context that front on the park, And so it's an architectural context. It's a context that has a range of different kinds of building uses and types. It's got different avenues and streets and things. And so, yes, the landscape architecture technical piece of the master plan for the park needs to happen, but the plan should not be siloed in such a way that it only is concerned with those two blocks inside that boundary. It should really be sort of, I like the one tier of properties or so around it to just really think of this space as a system that's bringing in context from the buildings around it as well as this green space. Because I think it is a tendency to think about it only in terms of what it is as a green space, and that's half the story.
Yeah, I agree. Any concerns about approaching it this way?
My concern would be that the greenhouse gets overlooked completely from window on the waterfront. I think that that's a really excellent space as well. So if they're going to look at a master plan for one park and then put the other park on hold, and then all this gets developed, and then in the future you might find out, well, this really might have worked good over here. So I would like to see them actually working on a master plan for both of those spaces.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of them going, like, to get a master plan underway for Centennial Park, because I know that's been on hold a long time, but I think we should really look at both the spaces simultaneously.
Yeah, I think the challenge with trying to do that is window on the waterfront, whether you pick any of the three sites or even another location within window on the waterfront, there are so many undeveloped or redevelopment opportunities on both public and private property around there, that there just have not been specific ideas brought forward or proposals brought forward. So trying to define a context in which the greenhouse would go, it wouldn't surprise me if 5 years from now there's a development plan or an effort that has redefined that whole waterfront edge, and within that there might be a location that you will end up saying, gee, I wish we still had the greenhouse, we could have put it right in this space. Maybe there's a different structure at that point that something goes in, but I just don't think, I don't, from a planning perspective, I don't think you put the cart before the horse on the window on the waterfront. I think you've got the ingredients for Centennial Park to do the evaluation. You don't have the same ingredients in a different location. I hear what you're saying. It'd be great to do master plans of a lot of different areas, but it's in a vacuum on window on the waterfront that makes it difficult, I think, you may come up with great ideas that some developer at some point might think is worth pursuing, but I think the waterfront charrette process did some of that and identified some alternatives. But there's no commitment to any of those specifically in terms of what goes where or any of that context. I know I'd love to have it further along so that we could make it a clearer sort of evaluation and choice, but I guess I struggle with that.
Pierre, I'm kind of with you in the sense of thinking that the window on the waterfront might be a good alternative. I do feel like an honest master plan for Centennial Park would say the park isn't suitable to support the greenhouse, the park is neutral about the greenhouse, or the park would be augmented by the greenhouse. And so I feel like that discussion can happen in the wake of a good master plan, apart from whether we think there could be other locations. At least that would be my hope, that there's something, kind of along those lines that, then we can have that next phase of discussion. And, if the Historic District Commission feels that strongly that, it really isn't the place for it, then it's either maybe window on the waterfront or nothing. But I think we can make that discussion with an informed master plan.
I think part of the challenge is what Kim described, which is the urgency of getting to dealing with that, with the greenhouse structure. Maybe I'm a little biased by my experience with the Western Machine Tool Works building. But we kept that, and probably kept that too long, with great ideas and great opportunities and even some interested developers at different points in that process, but never could land an idea in one place. And as we did all of that, the building quickly deteriorated. And then we ended up losing the building, and there still hasn't been a new idea or a new project that's coalesced on that kind of site. So I want to be with you. I want to be with you on that idea. And we need to continue to pay attention to what goes on there, because maybe an idea opens up along the way. Okay, I'm sensing positive on moving forward with the master plan. That's the key question right now.
Do we
Yeah,
need
I
a
think-
formal motion, or are we just say?
If you'd like to make it a motion, that's fine.
I move we, and what would be, I move that the Historic District Commission is supportive of the city undertaking a master plan for Centennial Park as quickly as possible.
Support.
All those in favor, say aye. Or
Aye.
yes.
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed, say no. No no's, the ayes have it.
Thank you. Okay. Next,
So next, Phil, you had,
the Udo. Nope.
no, National Register properties outside of the district.
Yeah, okay. This is trying to pick up on the conversation we had last month on this. Part of this is maybe the language that ultimately gets integrated into Udo. So it's another one that's related a little bit to the Uniform Development Ordinance. There are, the Downtown National Register District is the one that I've mentioned to you a couple of times. I've also let Kim know this after our last meeting. There's an area of the central neighborhoods, Kim's neighborhood, really the street she's on, she's part of a National Register district. When the original historic district was expanded to Cross River, include Centennial, include the houses around Centennial, the National Register nomination that moved ahead at the same time, or roughly the same period as that, National Register nomination included a much larger area that includes your neighbor, your street, and some other areas nearby that were not included in the local designation. So we have a local district that is all National Register, and then we have this little spur of National Register designated but not locally designated homes. And I think Jay was involved. He probably has the best memory on this, or the best history on this, back when all of this was going on. My sense of it, and Jay, correct me please, my sense of it is at the time the community was comfortable with the designation as it took place, but was less comfortable with the extension of that, and in part because Hope College owned some properties in that area, and there was resistance from Hope on the designations. And ultimately it fell back to looking at things predominantly on the west side of River Avenue. In any event, we've got two National Register areas that are not locally designated. Locally designated areas, we have review process and opportunity to comment. On the National Register areas, those two that are not local, we are slowly getting a voice on those, I would say. The downtown one particularly, I think Kim's neighborhood, I think, is still relatively unknown. That National Register piece exists. But downtown, it's starting to be recognized. And there's an attempt in the UDO to integrate a process or an opportunity for historic preservation issues to be raised with a developer early in the process. There's no standards, there's no requirements, there's not a rule that they have to follow or you have any authority over it, but there's an opportunity to comment. One of the things that Jenna has asked, Jenna's the planner who's working on the UDO, focused on the UDO. She and Mark Vanderplug and I have talked about creating a set of guidelines, broad guidelines for the downtown National Register District. Something that gives everybody coming in the door a framework of what expectations may be too strong a word, but what would be workable from a historic preservation perspective in that downtown district, at least to give them a sense right up front that there are some issues and there's a context to consider when you're doing a new building or a building addition. We had the last two projects, New Holland Brewery was one, and the other one across the street, I forget who owned it, but they're converting 2 storefronts and adding residential above. Both of those projects, we offered comments and essentially fell on deaf ears in terms of how they were received by both the Planning Commission. The DDA gave a little lip service to it, and I think understood the question, but they were more concerned about getting the project, keeping the project moving ahead. So trying to have an effective voice about preservation is part of this challenge. So the ability and desire, I need to sort of bounce it off you and make sure there's a comfort level with seeking some opportunity to comment on properties where there is work in those National Register areas, and then figure out a process that works smoothly for everybody and gets good information on the developer's plate so that they have the right material to work with.
I think we'd be remiss if we focused only on the local and didn't at least have some awareness, for lack of a more influential word, to what's going on the National Register in our area. It seems amiss to me.
I think that's true.
talks about what are our priorities and what we're gonna do, is let the staff know that, okay, we're gonna start paying attention to this, we have to do it. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't have a sense of how much is left to really get our hands around what's the art of the possible. You know what I mean by that? When I think about our downtown, and what I think owned by a lot of people, and they've got their own set of what they want to do. And so I'd like to think there's a lot of opportunity for additional historic preservation activities in and around our downtown, and in and around our whole city. But I don't have a sense of that. I'm wondering if that's a legitimate comment as far as what do we have? If that's the right way to frame it. What do we have left? Because most of our historic stuff was in the immediate downtown area. You get further out, you get into less significant pieces of architecture, but nonetheless, they were built in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and they're all beginning to think about, that's all becoming fair game for these things.
Yeah.
And I've seen firsthand, benefited from firsthand, the work that this group has done over the last 40 years or so, or 30 years. I guess I'm hearing you talk a little, not necessarily frustration, but I think we owe it to certainly a staff person like yourself to say, if there's something on the books, and the Historic Commission is at the table, needs to be at the table, and have a say on these things, and parents need to have a say. So, all I can say here is think about the study session, and educate some people about where, I mean, there's a lot of new people all the way around in every office of this place.
Sure.
So, just random thoughts there, but.
Jay, you're spot on, I think. And I think, we're doing a disservice, basically, if we're not involved in all this, because this is our job. This is what we were asked to do. So I think it's really important that we get involved with all this.
The art of the possible comment is really interesting too, because it's like, what are we at risk of losing? That National Register boundary, there was a reason it was in the National Register boundary. So where's the gap? And what are houses that were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, what are we at risk of losing if we don't protect that? I think it was pretty apparent too in one of the council meetings. I don't know when it was. It would have been last December, January, somewhere in there. I think it was around the time that there was the open house talking about the greenhouse. And there was a report out that I think was given, and it was surprising. No, that might have been. I knew it was after the election, like right after the election, so maybe within a month or so. And it was surprising how little collectively the council people knew about the district and about the greenhouse in particular. And I'm not saying they should know it at the level that we should, but the comments that they were making, unfortunately, weren't informed comments, because they just didn't know. And I suspect, to echo your comment, Jay, that that's collective for the district as a whole.
Well, I would add to that, the discussion and the process by which it was revised and took place. There was a lot of unknowing misinformation. Didn't even know that seems stupid. Why would we do it that way? But that's what we have. So that was a bit telling to me too. So I think there's good reason to offer anything. If the group wants, I'll talk to the city manager about, let's get into the study session. Probably won't get half an hour, but I think that's the best way to
smaller piece, just double-sided. This is the form-based code, which is a part of the veto. This combines our zoning ordinance, it combines our street requirements, subdivision requirements. The uniform development ordinance is one ordinance that embraces all of those ordinances that deal with development in the community. So it's a major undertaking. It's been underway for a year and a half maybe now. It's an extensive document. It's full of information. They're going through a very intense editing process right now. I think the Planning Commission has probably seen just about all of this, and it's, I think they're in general agreement that this document is moving forward, so they're entering this editing period. They're also out for public comment on at least portions of this. They've circulated a section that deals with downtown. They've circulated that to the Downtown Development Authority. That was something that they also sent to me, and I think I included it in your packet. Gives you a little bit of the focus. But I just began getting into this within the last few days, and it's a read. You know, and knowing the old ordinance pretty well and where to find things, it's a reorganization of a lot of things, and I think in the end it's very well done. There's a ton of information in here, but going through it and checking to be sure that it's accomplishing everything that, from a planning perspective, they want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Start over.
Okay. Hi, my name's Phil Meyer. But making sure that it accomplishes what planners are looking at, but also at the same time make sure there are things that impact historic preservation and the preservation districts that were in the original, the current documents that we're working under, and just making sure they're picked up here, or we create opportunities for adding some language that helps historic districts. So there's a lot to look at. I know Nick has identified a couple of things that he's particularly concerned about. So I want to kind of start with those, but just to say that there's a lot more in this, and maybe that's worthwhile, and I'll let you think about it a little bit. Maybe it's worthwhile to have Jenna and Mark and maybe the consultant in for another meeting. They were in about a year ago and kind of gave you an overview of this, but maybe a need to get into some more detail on this. At least have a look at the RTN district, the neighborhood district. I've done do you have the map that I gave, the last thing I sent you? This is just a real quick, I should have pulled this out when I was talking about Kim's neighborhood. I don't know how well you can see that. The different colors on there are the overlay or the form-based code zones within downtown. And I think Nick's focus is probably on the green ones, but I'll let Nick get into that. But the area that's kind of cross-hatched in gray are either National Register or local historic districts. So those districts end up overlapping the Centennial area. They overlap the central downtown overlay, and they overlap some of the yellow on this, and I'm forgetting what that is, but there's overlap between historic districts and some of those other zones that are identified in the ordinance. So there's reason to pay close attention to those from a historic preservation impact perspective. Nick, do you want to jump in on your ideas?
Sure. So I submitted some notes to Phil last week, I think Friday, to be included in the packet. So maybe you had a chance to kind of read through those. But my primary thinking here is that they've got this UDO breaks down all the zoning districts, and then for one subcategory of zoning districts, there's these form-based code districts, which include central downtown and all these, Washington Square and North Downtown and so on. One of the form-based code districts that I think concerns this commission is the Centennial District, the CNT district. And I think it's a great idea that the form-based code, or that the UDO have a form-based code district for the Centennial Zone, or the sort of context of Centennial Park, which actually includes maybe a half block or first tier of properties around the park as well, because it really considers, I think, properly both the green space that's a historic public space, but also the urban context around that space that also forms that space. And they're really not, in my mind, they're not separable, not historically and just not urbanistically. I think the park is within our historic district, our local district, City Hall is as well. But more broadly, there's just historic fabric that even though it's not in the district, or even if it's just green space and landscaping, it's still, I think, something that we should kind of look at a little bit deeper. And because the UDO and these form-based codes are in public comment currently, I thought now is kind of the time to bring this to you guys and kind of ask you to think about it with me a little bit more. I personally have submitted comments in the form of letters and things like that to the city with my signature on them as just one voice or isolated voices. I've submitted public comment through the survey tool as well, which is again just sort of like an individual, concerned citizen comment. But I think that this goes to the level where it might be beneficial for our commission to submit a letter on behalf of our commission that maybe Kim would pen and sign, that would carry a little bit more weight to it than just a single individual's opinion. And only if we consented across the board here that was a great idea. And I'm bringing some specific issues up relative to that, which we can talk about. So the first issue is that the Centennial Zone, it includes, if you're looking at the form-based code, it's this area in green, and it includes 2 and 4 family residential units to be, buildings to be included within that green area. And this is actually probably the most minor of my 3 concerns to me personally. In other words, I'm not terribly hung up on this one, but I did include it. And it's just to kind of question, do we really think duplexes at a two-family building really belong, say, next to City Hall or next to Centennial Apartments, the former Masonic Temple building, or is that sort of out of scale? I mean, a duplex might belong a block over within the residential fabric and in the neighborhood, but there's a certain gravity that these buildings have within this green shaded area. And there's a certain scale and massing that they have that I think kind of goes beyond the 2-family and probably the 3-family and 4-family as well for that matter. So that's item number 1. I think by the time you get into 5-family little apartment buildings, they might have a massing that's more kind of on par with what we're talking about. The second one, I think, is probably the most important one to me personally. After sort of just thinking about the city's underlying urban framework that is really fundamental and inherent to our central city. And I took a stab at kind of articulating it because it's been rattling around in my mind for a few years now. And I've put, I think, sort of tangential comments on the record in the past relative to this. But again, because the public comment window is right now for this, I decided to kind of really put it all out there. And I think this is probably the one that is the most likely to, well, I shouldn't say that, but what I would say is that I'm not taking for granted that others on this commission would agree with this stance. But the stance is basically that in a really simplistic, I guess, view, is that we've got these two principal public spaces in our city. We've got 8th Street, which is sort of like the living room of our entire community, you know, maybe including the township and Laketown Township. And it's where it's shared common space, which belongs to everybody. And it's of a commercial character. It's got daily life happening in it. And then we have this other principal public space, and I intentionally kind of limited it to 2 spaces because I really think there's only 2 that are on par with this level, and that's the other one is Centennial Park. And though Centennial Park has had commercial activity in the past and shop fronts as well, I think in general it's of a more reverent character. And I think that it's pretty rare for a city of our size and history to have so intact a really clear separation of the commercial sort of daily uses that shop fronts provide, and then this other kind of public space which isn't really geared towards that same character, but is more of an elevated, hierarchically elevated, important, reverent space where there's sacred uses, there's civic uses, there's opportunities to reflect on patriotic things like the War Memorial, for instance. And this space has these buildings on it which largely come from the City Beautiful movement at the turn of the last century and all the way up until really the Depression, which are buildings that are not shopfront buildings, but rather big communal buildings like this building, like City Hall, or like the post office, which was a federal building, or even like the Masonic Temple, which is a very civically oriented community organization. And so it's not really an accident, I don't think, that those buildings sort of coalesce around the park and create this sort of elevated, really important space. And so when the form-based code was sort of reckoning with this, I think it was properly recognized that the character that is going to inform the form-based code for 8th Street is really stuff that's on 8th Street right now. Great urban buildings that are mixed use and zero setback and all of those things. And that we should write the form-based code to continue that on 8th Street, because those are the kinds of buildings we want to continue to build and through other urban places within the city as well. But that Centennial Park is different enough in its context and its character that it should get a different form-based code. We don't just want to say that the DNA of 8th Street and the DNA of Centennial Park are so interchangeable that they can get the same form-based code, because the form-based code, after all, informs really the character of the buildings and thus the character of the space. And so it was separated out, which I think is the right move, but I think it stopped a little bit short of where I would like to see it, because it still includes shop fronts. And so I would say right now we have this opportunity where it doesn't have any shop fronts, though it does have plenty of commercial activity in the form of office spaces and in the form of sort of temporary commercial activity that takes place within the park itself. But it's this moment of coherence that this space has. It's not always had that, obviously. We had Reliable, which was a shopfront building, and big glazing and things like that. But before we just usher in shop fronts into this space, do we want to take a moment in the context of public comment period to say, wait a minute, this should be actually set aside from that workaday, commercial activity that is really available to every other context within this city. In other words, we've got the whole rest of the city to put shop fronts if we want. For the most part, we don't put them on residential streets maybe, but there's only one place that's really set aside for this kind of elevated, special place of distinction. So that's the point. Is I think shop fronts should not be listed as an allowed building type on the park. That's item 2. Item 3 is just simply that I love what they're doing with the Centennial Zone. I just think that the Women's Literary Club, which is informing on the Centennial Park context in a very important way, plays a very important role, should be included in that green. I believe that it's a big enough, important enough participation in the ensemble of the park that when we look at that DNA and look back at the ordinance after it's adopted and say, what is this context all about? The Women's Literary Club has something to say about that context, and so it shouldn't be set aside just because it's kitty corner to the park. It's a community organization from that era, and it's a civic building. And then the Centennial Avenue Reformed Church ought to be as well. There's another church included in the green, which is Hope Church, and yet Centennial Reformed is actually fronting the park, has dependency buildings that are fronting the park, and I just think it is so crucial to us fully understanding the context of the park to understand that sacred architecture here is in dialogue with civic architecture, in dialogue with residential architecture, and then transitioning into the intensity of downtown to the north, that it doesn't, I think we want to be thorough and complete in capturing this context and then putting it into a form of a form-based code. So that's item number 3, is just the expansion of the green space that's highlighted for this. And so what I'm bringing to you guys is the thought of us putting together a memo that we would submit to the Planning Commission, or maybe we would submit it to the city staff and copy the Planning Commission, or however we chose to do that. That would be calibrated to all of our concerns, and then kind of try to seize this moment of public comment to actually get a message to these other areas, to these other groups of people, because I think we have a special role and a special opportunity as this Historic District Commission to do that.
I think what I find really interesting, to sort of echo what Nick had said, is that there have been, to the Centennial District, there have been shops along the Centennial Park perimeter before, and they haven't lasted. And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe there's a reason Reliable's gone. Maybe there's a reason that the bank building is now an ancillary overflow for the church that's there. So so to Nick's point, to kind of put an exclamation point on it here, is we're in a position where we don't have those kind of businesses right now fronting Centennial park. So it's not as if there's one. The ones that have been there have gone.
Nick, I have a question for you. Should we be thinking about two zones within this green Udo zone? One is the zone that faces immediately on the park, and then I think it's Hope Church. It looks like they've taken the whole property back to maybe Pine
Yeah,
Avenue
Right.
that they've included in the green. I understand it from a property owner perspective. They just want to deal with one set of requirements, but it really, what you do on the western portion of that property is very different than what I think, could be very different than what you're suggesting facing the park.
I think so. I think it would be difficult to steer this process into breaking that into two zones at this point, just practically speaking. I mean, there's been so many meetings with planning commission and with staff and the consultant, and I'm sure they've beaten it to death, so I don't want to be flippant about, how easy it might be to do that. But I did make a comment about, well, it seems like there's a couple of different little inclusions in that verbiage that seem geared for parcels off the park, but like parking lots or parking structures, for instance.
Yeah.
But let's not open up a risk that once it's in the ordinance and it's allowed in that green zone, now it can be fronting the park. So that was I think that's there, even if it's not two separate C&T zones, there could be some verbiage that addresses the difference between on the park versus in the context, but not on the park.
Yeah.
It does seem odd to not include the rest of the perimeter of the park in this form-based code.
Yeah, and I think it might have something to do with the special privileges, and I'm not sure, I'm speculating here because I can't remember well enough because I've asked this before, but I think churches in general get a lot of leeway. They can build in residential context by right and so on. So it may be that it's kind of a moot regulatory point that it's not in there. The issue I have with it is that I think that this ordinance can be a kind of an instructional tool as well. If a developer comes to the city and wants to know what we're all about, we can say, well, we've got some rationale to why these form-based codes are what they are, and the church being a sacred building in that location, I think informs the context of the park in such a way that I would want to point. If I was the city, I mean, that paints a more complete picture of the context than if it's left out. So even if it doesn't really change the impacts from a regulatory standpoint, I think it clarifies the intent of the Centennial Zone by keeping it in.
Well, it's certainly puzzling that one church would be in and one not. And it's, as
Yeah.
you pointed out, Hope Church isn't even really fronting on the park.
Well, it is now because there's a big gap.
Yeah, right, you can
Yeah.
see
It's
it
visible,
from the
but
park.
it's not fronting in
Yeah,
a true
right,
sense,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So it's just, that's odd to me that maybe the CRC didn't get there soon enough, I don't know. Well, I like the work you've done on it, Nick, and I think it's definitely a thing we'd want to do is support, a joint statement if we can collectively agree and, if we want, what's the timeline for the submission or what's the open comment period?
Now, Nick, you may know better. I think this week or next, they're looking for comments, but you're a commission. I would say, if you've got comments, make sure you've got the comments you want, and if it takes an extra couple of days, I don't think that's a big deal for them, but the sooner the better.
I guess I'm asking about Nick's, if we want to get behind what Nick has done and whether we have other additions to that or thoughts, is that we would want to do that soon then and maybe vote. Do we need it
Collectively
again?
pen something.
Pardon?
Collectively pen
Yeah.
something within a relatively
Yeah.
short.
In an
What,
open
Kim, you don't
meetings
wanna do
way. I mean, that's the other thing is it's great that we got this on the agenda because we can pass it around on email, but the minute we start getting together to collaborate on a memo, all of a sudden we have to, announce the meeting and all these things if it grows beyond a certain number of people. So just from a logistics standpoint too, I just keep that in mind. I'd be happy to just, I think we need to hear from, if this is going to come from the commission, I think everybody should probably just like indicate whether they're comfortable or not comfortable, because I don't want to do anything that somebody's not
Mhm.
comfortable with, but I'd be happy to take a stab at a memo.
I support that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think a memo's a good idea. I think some of the notes you put in there, specifically distinguishing between the frontage parcels, and I know they have that in other foreign-based code sections, like Washington Square, they included kind of 2 sections and kind of distinguished certain parts of the ordinances in that between the 29th Street area and the 18th, 19th Street area. I think that would be something appropriate for those 2 to 4 units, the parking structures. If something like that happened on Hope's area, on that parcel, if that ends up getting divided and changed, I think that would be more appropriate and fine. But I agree with those frontage issues, and I don't see any reason why the women's liturgy in the Central Ave Park Church shouldn't be in there. So I'd be on board with that.
Looks like there's a comfort level. Anybody?
Yes.
Nick, I don't know if this is maybe a pat on the back, but first, thank you for bringing it forward. Second, in a quick conversation with Jenna today, she said a lot of what you've been sharing with them, and I don't know if it's the same thing or other things, but she said they've been integrating a lot of that into the draft. So this is a moving target that it's still moving, but it's a moving target, and whatever input they can get, I think it would be helpful for them. So.
Thanks for being willing to take it on and
Oh, they're
Write it
they're
up.
asking for
I mean-
public comment, and we're a commission, so it's a
Yeah.
great opportunity, and if anybody has, as long as it's legal, if anybody wants to send me notes, we can communicate
Sure.
with each other one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you've got a further input, I can, feel free to shoot me an email.
Yeah, it's all a draft until, then the question is, when do we want to submit it? And do we have a special meeting, or we could do it online? We could do a quick meeting online, as long as we get public notice out and do all the things correctly. We could have a good conversation on 24-hour notice, so.
I think that would be easy to achieve, especially if it was, if we're all on the same page and anyone who has questions or additional comments wants to share those with Nick and he pens something for us to evaluate, I think that probably being able to do it quickly over a Zoom call would work.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
All right, what else have you got on the hit list tonight, Phil?
Representation on Neighborhood Improvement Committee. That
Done.
was just a quick report out.
Done.
Yeah, Justin has volunteered, and I know Kim has forwarded the recommendation. Have you heard anything back after that, or?
Yeah, so I think City Council is meeting this month to approve it, so my first meeting on the committee would be in October.
Great,
Good.
thanks for doing that.
Mhm.
That's great. Section 106 reviews. This is another project that's out for comment right now, is the 10th Street cycle track. I included it under 106 reviews. I think I said this last time, but I'm not sure everybody was there. Because 10th Street, or a portion of 10th Street's in the National Register District, a 106 review process is initiated. The state has already given their response to the city, essentially saying trees should be maintained. That's the extent of what they got into. The city has done this pilot project. It was a lengthy pilot to begin with, and then it was shortened up a couple weeks into it, I think 2 weeks into it. So the question is, or the feedback they would like is on the two-way bike track. It's currently on 10th Street, on the south side of 10th Street. There's a buffer strip, 2 or 3 foot buffer strip, and then there are 2 lanes of traffic. The intent, and they couldn't do it within the curb lines as they currently exist, but the intent is to also have a lane of parking on one side or the other. The most logical place is to have it on the opposite side than the cycle track is on. So it wasn't a full pilot of what is being discussed, but the cycle track portion of that is what they're looking for some comments on. As I understand it, Transportation Services have received lots of comments, both pro and con, but lots of comments. I walk that almost every day, and almost every other day the cones have been thrown in the yard. Or
Yep.
There's all kinds of creative
Signs are moved.
play going
People
on.
park in the bike lane.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
are they gonna have to widen that street then to add a parking lane?
Well, that's,
They would have
we
to.
haven't seen any drawings yet. So
Man,
that's part of the question is, what's the comfort level with having the cycle track?
well, seriously, and how much use is it actually getting? Because anytime I drive by, it's nothing.
Well-
you
So,
can
Well, it's
only
gone
go
now, it's
east
all
and west.
gone.
is it gonna? Well,
took the
obviously,
last
yes.
Well, and they did,
Is it?
they did
Okay.
count too,
Did they?
so they've got real data instead
Okay.
of just, you know.
That's good to know.
I don't know that Hope coming back to school at the same time they were enacting that was probably the best. That was probably a little
Mhm.
challenging.
But it is a historic district, a portion of it, so, any comments you might have, there's an opportunity to comment through the 106 process. It'll be easier to comment once we see a plan, but at least there's an opportunity on the bike track portion of it right now. And I've heard pros and cons, Stephanie, of
Mhm.
what you just described. I've heard that, you won't get people there until it's there and people get used to it and all of that, so.
Right.
When do you get how do you make a true judgment about whether it'll be used or not?
Sure.
That's a question.
I feel like there's been more controversy over that than there was over putting the bike lanes in around the rest of town in some ways. I'm not quite sure why. But it's odd.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they did a really good job, like the rest of downtown, integrating bike lanes. But on 10th Street, I'm like, what's the point of this? Like-
From downtown into Common Park,
I guess I could see that.
really easy.
But I mean, it's not like an extraordinarily busy street, so I mean, do you really have to have like your separate lane? But that's just me, I'm like, whatever about it.
Yeah,
but-
I kind of agree with that too. 'Cause
Like,
I ride
okay.
my bike everywhere.
Yeah.
I haven't had any trouble with traffic. And most people are polite.
Yeah. I know, I feel like we take care for the
I,
most part, drivers in Holland, to watch for
I
that.
probably wrote it 10 times, Mark, maybe more, on the principle that, like anything that's new, there's a natural sense of, oh, we don't need this. The first time you drive through a traffic circle, you say, oh my gosh, how's this going to work? People are going to be killed. And then about the 10th time you go through and you go, oh, well, this really saves a lot of time. You don't have to stop for nothing. And so I kind of felt the same way. The first time I crossed it, first time I crossed it was the Saturday that people were moving in at Hope. So they were intentionally violating it, which is fine, understandable, but it made it pretty awkward. And then the second or third time I tried it, I thought, oh, well, you know what? This really does speed things up. It's really a nice thing. And by maybe the 5th or 8th time, I felt like, yeah, and it's a mile, right? From Washington to Lincoln would be a mile. So I felt differently about it, again, having ridden it. But probably if I just drove by, or if I was one of the people inconvenienced by not being able to park, I might feel differently. And it was well used toward the end, I thought. Did you have the same feeling, or?
Yeah, and I would say the other thing is that a lot of people in our district with children ride on the sidewalk, which is more or less dangerous sometimes. And I noticed a lot of younger, and sometimes even unsupervised younger children riding in the bike track because I think parents thought, well, this is safer than riding on the normal street. So, yeah, it's, yeah, I mean, I have my own opinions about it, and I've expressed those, and, you know, I'm generally in favor of more bicycle stuff, but the tree thing would be, I think, that would be a hard thing to see any trees go, so, I don't know.
We don't know yet if trees would need to be removed, I don't think.
We don't.
Some of those trees have survived a lot worse than this and are practically enveloped by the sidewalks and things like that, but I don't know.
Yeah. I understand there have been some trees that have already been identified to be removed just because of the condition of the trees.
Age and condition, sure.
But I don't know overall what that, you don't need to give any comments now, or if you've got comments about the cycle track or feelings one way or another individually, you can certainly get a hold of Tammy Glover over at Transportation Services. At any point the commission wants to make comments, either now or once we see a plan, there's that opportunity too. And you could feedback as a commission if you wanted to at that point.
I think there is a meeting September 10th where they're going to discuss that again and do further presentation and hear public comments. So.
Is that just a general public meeting focused just on that?
I believe so. I don't know if that'd be the city, transportation is hosting that.
Okay.
Whoever did the first one, which I think was transportation.
Okay. I'll double check that and where
Okay.
and get the details, and I'll send it out to everybody just so you have that.
Thanks.
The other item under the 106 reviews is just almost a reminder. Well, there's two. City Hall landscaping and drainage. We met and talked about it last time. There really weren't any comments no concerns that came out of that. And that has been passed along to the consultants. The Max bus shelters, we still do not have any information about those, either how many or where they're being proposed. We may get some more information this week. The Neighborhood Improvement Committee may have some involvement in that as well. But it's Mark from Neighborhood Improvement Committee that's getting that information. So really nothing to share with you other than it may come on your agenda at some point again. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second?
All those in favor?
Yep.
Yes.